are you? Welcome to the Hunt Institute's Race and Education webinar series. You are in the right place at the right time, and we are so grateful that you decided to join us and spend an hour having meaningful conversations about the role race plays in our education system. And I'm so grateful for our panelist, Dr. Heather Harding, who's moderating the conversation, Senior Director of Education Grant Making at the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Foundation, Dr. Selma K. Bartholomew, President of Partner with Legacy, and Catherine Kimball, curriculum writer and designer at the XQ Institute, and Rodney Robinson, 2019 National Teacher of the Year, who's making a new transition that he'll tell us all about on the webinar today, hopefully. We're so grateful for all of you. We have another minute before our conversation actually gets started, but again, wanted to extend our sincere thanks, appreciation, and wanted to thank you for your love and your enthusiasm about having these meaningful and hard conversations about the role race plays in our education system. Today's conversation is on the pressing need for culturally responsive curriculum in classrooms. We want to make sure that you are out tweeting these conversations and sharing it on Facebook Live. If you're watching it on Facebook Live today, make sure you share it and you post and you comment. So we want to hear your enthusiasm online as well. So make sure you tweet and you share the race and education hashtag race and ed webinar hashtag for today. We're so grateful for all of you. Thank you so much. And we are going to turn it now over to Dr. Javed Siddiqui, the Hunt Institute's President and CEO, our fearless leader. We are so grateful for you, Javed, and for your willingness to champion these conversations about the role race plays in our education system. So again, thank you so much. And Javed, please.
Thank you, Senegal, and thank you for those warm remarks. Welcome to the second installment of the Hunt Institute's new webinar series, Race and Education. For those of you joining us for the first time, the Institute was founded by four-term North Carolina Governor Jim Hunt for the sole purpose of supporting education policy needs of governors, state lawmakers, and other senior level state officials. Equity is at the forefront of all that we do. It has been, and with the battle for racial equity and justice not yet over, we wanted to do our part to uplift voices of people, voices of organizations committed to creating the opportunity for children of color. This is the second installment of our Race and Education webinar series, an ongoing series that will address topics such as policing in schools, implicit bias, teacher diversity, and much more. We want this webinar series to inspire, inform, and challenge those who are fighting for justice and equal treatment for communities of color across the country. Our last webinar was a great conversation about challenging racism in state and local education systems, and I encourage you to visit the Hunt Institute Facebook page. There will be a recording. The recording of that conversation is found on our Facebook page. I sincerely hope you will be able to join us for all of these conversations, and we'll do your part to share this invitation within your network. We look forward to working with you to find tangible solutions for removing systemic barriers for children of color. I also would like to echo Senegal's thanks and gratitude to our panelists, Dr. Selma Bartholomew and Catherine Kimball and Rodney Robinson, our distinguished guests today, for your commitment and willingness to share your expertise and enthusiasm for transforming school curriculum and pedagogy. Delighted to have Dr. Heather Harding, Senior Director of Educational Grant Making at the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Foundation, to moderate our conversation today. Heather, your partnership and friendship are so important to us at the Institute, and I'm so thankful for you being with us. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Heather, to get our conversation going.
Thank you, Dr. Siddiqui. Welcome, everybody. I want to talk first, before we jump to the panel, just to share what we do at the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Foundation. And I think we do four important things to invest in the nation's public school system. You know, the first is that we invest in developing excellent educators. And second, we want to support access to excellent instruction through that work. And we hope that the instruction will be aligned to college and career ready standards, because all of our students really deserve access to work and knowledge and skills that gets them ready for their dreams. Finally, we seek to build equitable learning environments through our grant making and investment. And through all that work, the really, I think, centerpiece of the focus at Schusterman is the commitment to racial equity. On today's important topic, we've been working for about 5 years to ensure that teachers have access to great instructional materials And we think that's important because then they can focus their time, energy, and creativity to bringing those lessons to life. And as all these panelists I know will attest to, excellent instructional materials are only defined as materials that unlock mysteries and the keys to knowledge for students that are culturally and linguistically relevant. They have to see themselves in the work. We think that's very important at the Schusterman Foundation. And in order for young people to be engaged and motivated to learn, particularly at this historical moment, we have to have, kids have to see themselves, and instructional materials have to provide an accurate view of history. Anybody who has met me before knows that I have a little tagline that I'm always promoting for Schusterman, and that is that Schusterman hearts teachers. We absolutely try to leverage our dollars to invest in great educators across the system, so that they can deliver on the promise of the education system as a great equalizer. So there are 4 points that I need to make before I turn this over to what is sure to be a fabulous panel discussion. One is, you know, these issues of police violence have taken center stage in what I keep hearing every week around this dual pandemic. There's a global health pandemic for sure, and there's also a racial injustice or a reckoning that the country is going through. We have to be able to step back and evaluate the institutional barriers that children of color face. As Dr. Siddiqui and Senegal shared with us at the beginning, Hunt Institute is committed to helping educational leaders think through these issues. And that is why we're here today at this webinar. I will just give you, those of you who are joining, another reminder to use the hashtag race and education. And please make sure that you submit your questions to the Q&A tool at the bottom of the screen. And if you're viewing the event on Facebook Live, make sure you share that. So we have an all-star cast for our panel today. We're going to be talking through what's the current state of classroom curriculum. And I want to introduce our panelists and then throw to them. First, we heard Dr. Bartholomew will talk about curriculum challenges facing students. Teacher of the Year, I mean, what an amazing opportunity to hear from him. Rodney Robinson will talk about challenges that he sees with the students he works for in Virginia. And Ann Catherine Kimball will talk about some work that they've been doing at XQ. So I'd love to start with you, Ann Catherine. The XQ Institute has made major strides in creating resources and content to support historically underserved students. Could you begin to share with us some guiding principles for those who want to help their schools be more welcoming to students who have not historically been served well by traditional schools?
Absolutely, which is a very large and important task. It's a very large and important calling, especially when you are charged with educating students of color. I think that the best place to start, and as a former teacher, where I would have wished I could have started, was with the XQ learner goals. Root your classroom practices, root your curriculum, root your systems, and creating learners who are masters of fundamental literacies, holders of foundational knowledge, generous collaborators, original thinkers for an uncertain world, and then finishing up with those students being learners for life, because if you can instill that in students, you've given them the key, you've given them the barriers, you've given them the guardrails to take on the first 4 and always commit to these no matter what they learn, so that whatever capacity they reach education, they're also a leader supported by these learner goals.
Great. Let me ask one follow-up question that actually all the panelists should weigh in on, which is just if there's anything you want to say as an opening statement around the current state of classroom curriculum, I'd love to just make sure we frame our responses around that. Is there anything you want to add there, Ann Catherine?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, as a former high school teacher, I taught 10th and 11th grade in Chicago in an urban school district. And the curriculum I was handed was not reflective of the students that I was sitting in front of. And when students were not engaging with the content, it was like, maybe they're not doing the homework, maybe they're not, taking good enough notes. And it took me really stepping back and being like, no, it's the content. They are bored. So you've really got to make sure that you make it make sense for students of color. We cannot force things like the Crucible on students. We cannot force things like the classics on students. And the classics are only the classics because we continue to teach them. So if we sub out some of that content with more relevant content, with content that is exciting and content from their own hometowns, right? So thinking about when I taught American literature and we're teaching The Great Gatsby, I subbed in Nilla Larson's Passing. Passing is about the Black experience of a light-skinned Black woman and a dark-skinned Black woman and how their different takes on passing reflected throughout their life choices. My students loved that. They were able to walk around Chicago and pass the Drake Hotel. And that was just me making one curricular switch. And that's all it takes. Just switch it out, make it make sense, make it relevant, make it engaging for students.
Thank you so much. Rodney, I'm sure you have plenty to add to this discussion. And Catherine sort of laid out the specific ways that she adapted. I'm going to ask you the same two questions. The first one is really like, what do you see as the current state around curriculum materials that are available and that are being used? But you have a unique perspective as you teach at the Virgie Benford Education Center. So if you can tell the people a little bit more about your context, and then what you see and what kind of adaptations you've made around that.
Yes, I work at Virgie Benford Education Center. That is a school inside the Richmond Juvenile Jail. So my students range in age from 12 to 19 years old. Most of them have been accused of crimes ranging from truancy to murder. And so it's really important that when they get there, that the curriculum meets their needs. Because I'll be honest, the current state of history curriculum in Virginia, because I'm a history teacher, is garbage, and I mean, not gonna mince words on that. And it was,
be honest.
and it was so evident recently because if you know in Richmond, of course, the whole controversy has been Monument Avenue, but with all the Confederate statues and they're taking them down. And a big one, of course, was the Robert E. Lee statue. Well, unfortunately, I went on social media and I looked at some of the arguments that were being made to keep it. And the number one argument was the lost cause argument. And they were saying, oh, Robert E. Lee was against slavery, but he fought because he loved Virginia, so he fought with the Confederacy. And most historians were like, what? That is ridiculous. But the reality is that is SOL Objective BUS 7.D. It says that, word for word, that Robert E. Lee did not fight, only fought for the Confederacy because he loved the state of Virginia. And so that is the problem with current curriculum. It's just outright lies. And when you have people raised on those lies, then they tend to spout ignorance and things that hold back society from advancing. And so it's really important that we just tell the truth when it comes to history, because when we tell lies, we just hold everyone back. Everyone's not going to progress. And I think in Virginia, luckily, with the removal of the history SOLs, and they replaced it with something called the History Skills Progression Chart. And what that progression chart shows that in each grade, what a student should be able to do, what historical skill should a student have by the time they're in first grade, by the time they're in 12th grade. And so to me, that was great because I just threw all that curriculum out the window. Now my job is to teach them skills. And so that allowed me to bring in a lot more culturally relevant material that the students were into, and just material that inspired them, that affirmed their identity as young Black men and women. And it really got my students, they went from becoming, oh gosh, history, to okay, what are we going to do today? Or in some cases, hey, I want to learn about this. And so because I now have a skills chart that says, hey, I just need to teach them how to analyze sources, how to read timelines, how to interpret data. So let me go and pull in some primary sources, and then we can do that as a class. And so not only am I affirming their identity, but I'm teaching them the skills that they need. And then on the other hand, my principal came to me And she's like, hey, we need new textbooks. I was like, please do not waste money on buying new textbooks. You know, buy me some Chromebooks, buy me some iPads, give me the technology, you know, because a textbook costs, what, $75? Save 3 textbooks, I got enough money for a Chromebook. And so that's what I want. I want those sorts of things that inspire my students to go on and research and use those skills that I'm teaching them, because in the end, that makes them a better student and a critical thinker when they can analyze things and make decisions for themselves and not read boring, outright lies from textbook and curriculum that is issued to them by the state.
So hashtag tell the truth.
Pretty much.
Hashtag tell the truth in history and civics communication. Yeah, I hear
Actually,
you.
I would say hashtag stop lying.
Stop lying. Okay, yes, I'll take that too.
Kids research and find their own truth.
I'll take that too. I'll take that too. And I want to just underscore that your focus was the shift in the standards was to skills development as opposed to, you know, these specific things that unfortunately reference back things that are lies.
Yes.
Okay. Let's bring Dr. Selma Bartholomew into this conversation. Let us know, you know, from your perspective, the state, like what is the state of the curriculum materials? And then tell us a little bit about the Legacy Lab and how your work informs this discussion.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. And thank you, Rodney Robinson, for such an honest conversation. I thought I was going to be popping some bubbles today, so let's just keep going. So I'm Dr. Selma Bartholomew, Dr. B. We work directly with schools, with teachers around the core work of teaching, learning, and leading. And when people say, well, Dr. B, what do you do? Our work is really about ending the social reproduction of failure, and really helping our teachers have a better understanding of curriculum. So first, what do I mean by the social reproduction of failure? How do you get Black and working class kids to only want working class jobs? Well, you have a written curriculum that doesn't show them anything empowering about who they are, right? You give them images of self that are stripped away, and images of self that just, they don't see Rodney Robinson, they don't see anybody else that they can envision a future and that they are feeling connected to. And so the intersection of race, education, our criminal justice system, and something that no one wants to talk about, which we talk about, is economics. So in our discussion around this social reproduction of failure, when we talk about curriculum, most people just want to talk about the textbook. And so I'm nervous because now when they say culturally relevant curriculum, they think that they're going to go to the same companies and they'll swap out a few pictures and they'll say, okay, look, I put some Black and brown faces in there. What else do you want? I gave you a culturally relevant curriculum. In the meantime, they've purchased it from the same people that have been buying the same curriculum. They are the same ones who make the test. They're the same ones who assess the test. So the bubble I want to pop today with everyone around this issue of curriculum is, are we willing to walk away from what we have been perpetuating and that passive violence against our children around failure? So what I mean by that is, our children and our teachers are constantly being told that Black and brown children have a word gap, a 1 million word gap. Are you willing to step away from that? So we've been successful in math and in STEM because we say to our teachers, that is so demoralizing to think I'm going to walk into a kindergarten class and I have a kid named Jason and he has a 1 million word gap. Who wants to be that teacher? How can I possibly be successful in that space? So what we talk about is that mathematics is a language and that Black and brown children want to play with words and they want to tell stories around words. And so the curriculum does not do that. And so instead they want to just purchase, you know, they want to do the whole Common Core piece that doesn't even talk about relationships, doesn't really get to the content and the pedagogy. So for us, we are seeking to really end that social reproduction of failure and give our teachers and our students a better vision of what is the intent of a curriculum. And for me, the intent is about economics. You can't talk about criminal justice and those things if you're not willing to have an honest conversation about where our curriculum has been leading our children, which is to the prison pipeline. And I want to talk about moving our children to an economic agenda and to an economic platform. So I'm honored to be in the conversation today, and thank you.
I hear you. Thank you for that opening statement. If you have questions along the way, particularly about what any of the panelists said, please drop it in the Q&A box. That's my moderator reminder. I want to go back to Ann Catherine. Ann Catherine, you started with a powerful set of foundational principles. And if you could just tell us a little bit more about what the XQ Institute is working on in terms of resources, how people can access this, and what some of the major tenets of that work are.
Right now, we are doing a lot of work around on our blogs around anti-racist teaching strategies and going back into your existing systems and not only just reflecting on the system itself, but reflecting on your role in that system, and having some humble conversations internally, so that those conversations that you have with your students virtually or in person, along with your administrative staff, are rooted in we want to be anti-racist and explicitly calling it out. We at XQ not only support our schools, but we create these materials and a community of practice. We have some sessions going on right now where we support schools who are already doing this work. We've got a school in LA that comes to mind that supports students who are facing homelessness, foster care, students who are undercredited or overaged, making sure that the students who have been traditionally underserved are met with resources and conversations that uplift them, and making sure that those schools are supported, not only with content, but with each other in a community, so that this work does not feel like it's being done in isolation.
It sounds connected to a question that I want to throw to Rodney around how you create an equitable culture in your classroom. We've been talking a lot about that at the foundation, and it would be wonderful to hear how you approach that, and then what kind of supports you think that other educators need to make good on that promise.
Well, in my classroom, I would tell my students, like, we go back in history. We're the old African-American schoolhouse, the 18th century schoolhouse, 19th century schoolhouse. And the reason I say that is because I have 10 students in the class. Those students will range from 6th grade to 12th grade. I'll have a student who's taking an AP course sitting next to a student who's developmentally delayed. And so I have to let them know that, look, we're all in this together. We're gonna work together. We're going to work on skills. I'll give you skills, independently that work on your subject. But at the same time, we need to help each other out. So I look for leaders. And it's crazy because in our environment, most of my students have never had a positive experience where they could be an academic leader. So they welcome that. And they're willing to help out the other students. They're willing to say, hey, go work with the student, Mr. Robinson. I got him. I'll show him how to do it. And that's what it's all about. We're in this together. And the reason they buy into it is because when they get there, we take care of those social emotional needs. When our kids come in, let's be honest, they're on the street and they're surviving. So when they come into the class, come into our facility, first of all, they're usually going through some sort of withdrawal. Whether it's chemical withdrawal from illegal drugs or chemical withdrawal from the drugs that the school system has forced down their throat to keep them quiet in the classroom. They're going through that. And so my job is to just meet them, talk to them, talk about their past experiences with school, talk about to them about their goals and aspirations, and we're gonna work on it. Whatever you wanna do, my job here as the teacher is to support you. And then in our environment, we have a full psychologist, we have a special ed case manager. We have mental health workers. We have everything we need to take care of those social emotional needs. But here's the problem though. Why do kids have to go to jail in order to get that?
Thank you.
They should have that in their comprehensive schools. They should have psychologists. They should have mental health workers. They should have exceptional ed case workers who understand their disabilities and put them on the proper path to success. I think one of the saddest but inspiring stories to me was this last year, maybe 2 years ago, I can't remember. We had a student, she violated curfew to come to our school, to get arrested and come to school because she needed to get her academic record straight. And it was great because she had that faith in us, but why did she have to do that? Why did her mother have to tell her, hey, go back to the jail so that they can get your record straight so that you can graduate? And so that's what we need to start doing. The resources that we have at our school, we have a 1-to-1 technology ratio with our students. And why do kids have to go to jail to get that? Those resources should be available to them from the day they are born. And until America starts getting serious about equitable education funding, we're just going to be working behind the 8 ball the entire time.
because we have to keep socially reproducing failure, right? We have to keep that pipeline going. And so you're talking about that relationship piece that you can't find that in the textbook. That's that taught curriculum that a teacher now has to invest in and has to have support in and want to build real relationships with their students. And that takes courage. I heard Ann Catherine talking about having anti-racism conversations. Not everybody knows how to do that, right? That takes a level of courage. It's a level of vulnerability. It's a level of compassion. And so you've got to be able to now get to the heart of the issue around relationships, around content, and around pedagogy. And that question of student leadership is one that matters to us so much in our work. You're absolutely right. We do a lot of work in mathematics and STEM. And when we tell people we can fix math education, they say, what do you mean, Dr. B? What? Everybody's been broken for so long. I can fix math education because I go after student leaders in my classroom. We have our Legacy Lab Day where we train teachers to actually develop leaders. And the funny thing about it, our teachers often say, oh, everybody's a leader. Oh, so I don't feel like identifying leaders. Well, if everybody's a leader, we would be okay. So let's just train a few of them and let's help you learn how to do accountable talk. Let's help you learn what good math talk is, because Black and brown children, peers matter, right? And when I talked about letting go of those other studies, we need to now look to get to know our children, and we need to know that peer relationships matter, that our students can lead, they want to be empowered, and leading for us is not handing out papers. Leading for us is let that teacher go conference with kids in Legacy Lab Day while you're managing your group, while your peers are learning how to follow you in a good way, not on the gang that you're going to be pulled out when you leave school. So that question for us about leadership and ending that social reproduction of failure, it can only happen if we begin to truly invest in those models that speak to voice and a pedagogy of love. I think that's what you're speaking to, Rodney. It's a pedagogy of love when you are willing to make that space for students.
Pedagogy of love. And Catherine, you look like you can't wait to get into this. So I'm going to just let you get in.
I feel like I'm on double Dutch and I'm like, all right, almost.
Yes.
Come on in.
It's like the relationship piece is so important. Students will do what they want to please you, right? Like they yearn for those connections. You have to give them the space and the opportunity to form those connections. And you cannot do that in a super strict, sit down, raise your hand, sit this way, where's your khakis, wear your shirt. You don't get to know them that way. So you're only perpetuating the system of them just being numbers. I love that you have to make them leaders. If everyone was a leader, we wouldn't be in this situation, right? But find out what they are a leader in. They may not be a leader in this subject. They may not be a leader in this way of thinking, but figure out, get to know them. Start with that internal reflection. What do you know about yourself? Listen to their conversations, even if they are off task in a group assignment. Don't get mad at them. Listen to what they're off task about, and then weave it back into the lesson. I had a student, I let the kids get on Chromebooks to do something, and we had Hapara where I could watch them, and I wasn't really watching that closely. A student was playing a video game. Instead of me getting mad and being like, that's 4 demerits, you have detention, I was like, what game are you playing? And you better be winning, because if you're not winning, now you got extra homework. So giving him the opportunity, and then like seeing the beautiful conversation between him and his friends being like, what, you were playing on this way? The kid had figured out a way to get around, like Hapara, figured out a way to get around the firewall, installed a VPN on the Chromebook. Like, that doesn't warrant me getting mad. That warrants me being like, oh, okay, great. You're a leader in this. Let me turn to you when we need some kind of computer help. That could have gone a different way, right? If I would have been like, you got detention for that. No, this kid is a leader. Let him share what he did.
Yeah.
But can I ask one? I'm sorry, Dr. Bartholomew. I want to make sure in the conversation people hear what is the nuance difference between the relationship work, or maybe there's just a way to talk about it, and the curriculum pieces, right? So this notion of cultural relevance is, I need to see myself, I need to see that my curiosities and my work is valued in the classroom. How do you relate that to the materials that people should be advocating for? We have another Q&A from around like, what should we be advocating for at the state and local levels around policy? And I think we need to tease those apart in the conversation.
How we do it is we actually don't take the traditional definition of curriculum. So if you're working in classrooms and you think your curriculum is just your textbook, that has to go. So your curriculum is your written curriculum, which includes your standards and your textbook. And for Black and brown kids, it's been those worksheets. right? And those dittos and those copies. It is the taught curriculum. It is how you go about this. So as Catherine is talking about that relationship piece, I want to make people know, it's not just, I want to be honest about it and don't think just because Dr. B is a woman of color that it's easy for me, right? I want to be able to create a safe space so that we realize that everybody belongs in that space of different race and different gender, that anybody can be supported to have that relationship piece in the taught curriculum. Then there's the learned curriculum. Then there's the assess curriculum. We don't have enough time to do this, but assess means to sit beside. It's not what we've been doing to children and that deficit thinking. There's the supported curriculum. There's the hidden curriculum. And then there's the null curriculum. So culturally relevant curriculum is birthed out of the fact that the hidden curriculum had these outcomes that say, I'm leading you to the pipeline of prison, or I can walk into a classroom and never hear a child's name called, or that Black boys are being pushed into special education. That's all what has birthed this question of we wanting a culturally relevant curriculum. And last, on your last webinar, you had Angelique Albert from the American Indian Graduate Center, and she did a powerful job talking about indigenous curriculum. So I want to let people know that there's a space for, right, for that diversity there. And then the null curriculum is what we are seeing playing out with COVID-19. In other words, I wish I could prepare you for everything, but I can't. And so when we talk about math and STEM and this null curriculum, look how many people don't know how to read a graph today. Look how many people don't believe in science, right? So if we can't get that diversity, we can't get
over there
of that conversation about that null curriculum and making space for true diversity in our classrooms. It's not about the textbooks. And finally, I want to say what matters to me in this space is I am a woman of color and I do own my own business, and I'm going back to the economics, right? So 1 in 10 if you're Asian owns a business, 1 in 158 if you're Black. So when last week when Michael Smith and Christian talked about budgets being moral, right? So we'd like to say, yes, you paint the streets with Black Lives Matter, but Dr. B is gonna push you as a math person. Where'd you buy the paint? Who delivered the paint? Where'd you buy the brush, right? All of those things we have to be willing to ask if we're going to end the school to prison pipeline. So yes, those nuances matter, and how you get to it in your school is you better have a much more comprehensive and thoughtful definition of a curriculum, because they'll keep you in the written, not where Rodney just took us, that taught, that hidden curriculum.
And Rodney, jump in, but I'm going to put another question from the Q&A box on the table. You know, you all have talked about the mind shift or mindset deficit, the deficit mindset. And so if you can also speak to how district and school leaders can shift that, given what's been perpetrated against children of color.
Well, I think that leads directly into my new job. You know, my new job in Richmond Public Schools is to recruit more male teachers of color and more teachers of color, period. Because ultimately we have the curriculum, but if the voices that are in charge of that curriculum that are at the table are all the same voices, then you got a problem. And so it's really important that we get more Black and brown voices at this table to start having these conversations. If we want to talk about deficit mindset, let's talk about how some of these middle-class white teachers who come into urban areas who don't believe that the kids can do anything and how horrible that is on our children. And so it's really important that our students see teachers who look like them, teachers who come from the same neighborhood as them, teachers who understand everything, teachers who can pronounce their name. You know, I think that's a big thing. When you're reading your roster the first day of school, you know, and you get a kid's name correct, do you know what you've just done for that kid? That kid's probably gone through 10, 11 years of school without a teacher correctly pronouncing their name on the first day of school. And so that immediately builds up a relationship, something that you would never have thought of. You know, I had my goddaughter. She was so excited. She said, my teacher's name is Amara too. And that's all she talked about for the first month of school, that her teacher had the same name as her. That is a cultural connection that is missing from education, especially since, you know, let's be honest, we're 80% white teachers and 50% of our students are students of color. If we want to really transform education, we need to get more voices of color at the education table. We need more teachers, more counselors, more principals, more secretaries of education. When I went to ECS, which is Education Commission of the States, with all the policymakers in the United States, education policymakers, there was one brother in the room. There was 0 Latinx people in there. There were no indigenous people. And so I said to myself then, I can't go back into the classroom, because if I'm given access to these rooms, I need to make my voice heard, because this is where the decisions are made about curriculum, about funding, about the things that have the biggest impact on our students. And if no one is in that room representing these students, then they will consistently get looked over and pushed into minimum wage jobs or into the prison system.
I hear you. The next webinar is on exactly that topic. So I just want to put that out there so you all stay with us this next time around. I do want to give Ann Catherine an opportunity to talk about a piece that she wrote about Juneteenth. And I'm sure lots of people in the audience have read it, but can you talk about how the celebration of a student's culture is a good and important curricular strategy?
Yes, it is not only a relationship builder, but also it is a strength builder, a resilience builder, a pride builder. And I think that students of color need so much pride reinforced on a daily basis, because everything around them is telling them they're not enough, they're not good enough. So being able to celebrate and like hype it up, right? So for Hispanic Heritage Month, I would have a day where students could only speak Spanish in the classroom. I cannot speak Spanish. So if my Black students have something to say, you better ask your classmate. And I also brought in someone to translate for me, but things like that, like celebrate it so that when things happen in the world, like immigration, my Black students can have some empathy around that. When things like George Floyd happen, my Latinx students can have empathy around that. When things like our Chinatown being vandalized, right? Like we can have our Black students be like, yo, what's going on? Come stay with me. To our students who don't look like them, it's building empathy through celebration, through, hey, we're gonna have a taste test day. Everybody bring in your culture's version of rice, and just letting them build those connections. So celebrating culture, celebrating differences, celebrating that community is going to build up that room of learners, that room of leaders, because they now have that lived experience with someone who does not look like them through a positive channel like celebration.
There's another, go ahead, Bronny.
And we talk about the benefit of Black students and students of color when they get teachers of color. Imagine what the benefit for white students when they get teachers of color. You now don't have to believe the BS that your parents and community have told you about Black people, because you see a Black person every day. You do work with a Black person. You understand the humanity, the intelligence, and everything associated with Black people. So now you can counteract the negative stereotypes that the media gives you, that society gives you, that your parents give you. And so it's really important that everybody gets teachers of color in the classroom, because we all benefit from diversity.
I have one story. I had a student, I usually have my hair tied up, and a student was like, Miss Kimball, what's on your head? How do you get it like that? I was like, you know what, I'll show you. I untied the whole head wrap, had a whole 2-strand twist underneath, let him tie it up, let the girls in the classroom walk him through how to tie it up. He was like, cool, all right. But just like you said, Rodney, it does something for them when the person in front of them for 180 plus days is a person of color.
I also think we have to also approach this from a place of compassion as well. I think that we don't recognize when you see so much of that passive violence, which fuels the physical violence, we have to understand where it's coming from as a place of fear, right? And the unknown. And so what we do and really focus on as well is that pedagogy. So that's why we do the lab day, so that we can help our teachers kind of have a model, because the truth is teaching is not a spectator sport. And you need to be able to have support to learn how to improve your pedagogy, right? And to improve your practice. So that's why we do models like our lab day and really focus on things that teachers can be successful with, giving them structures around how to help kids in groups, giving them structures around how do you celebrate? Because maybe I'm not feeling safe enough to do that Latin Day, right? But I need to be able to every day in my math classroom or every week in my math classroom, create opportunities where kids are writing compliment cards and I'm teaching the child how to celebrate and to begin to create a safe space. So I think you have to also have a place of compassion for this, because this is not, it's not easy. I've been teaching for 20 years. I have a wonderful staff who are educators. And when we go in to collaborate with our teachers, it is about helping them with that pedagogy of voice, of confidence, and that pedagogy of love. And I'm honored to say I don't just work in I'm one of the few Black-owned businesses in New York City. I've worked in places like Bismarck, North Dakota. I've worked in St. Louis. And so to be able to really understand how hard teaching is, like we won't be able to really do race and education, and let me see how I play with the words. So you can think race by way of color, but you can think maybe there's a race in education. If we set our race and say, we want to change this, we're on a race right now to really change the trajectory of outcomes for Black and brown children, then we can begin to now approach that space in a compassionate space for our teachers and say, I'm having compassion for you when I actually allow you the opportunity to experiment with your curriculum and not punish you with the test, right? Because that's why they don't want to experiment, because they told them this is the standards and here's the test. And so the sigh of relief went out in March. Nobody wants to say it, but everybody breathed relief because the test went away. Hello, right? So you can't really move this, and you can't have this conversation about race and education if you don't also go to a place of compassion and helping our teachers. And so we focus on structures in math and in STEM. We're the only company that does a math notebook, because it's around this idea of writing and storytelling in mathematics that is for all children. It doesn't matter. You could be from Egypt, you could be from Yemen, you could be from India. You have a story to tell. So let me offer you some structures that that teacher can be successful with you as they get to know your cultural background through the content and through the pedagogy.
Dr. B, can you give us a short overview of what the lab looks like so that folks get a sense for what they should see if they were to get this kind of resource?
Absolutely. So it is a model built around student leadership. So the first thing you would see is you would see kids sitting in groups at tables, right? And they would have a lab leader, and the leader would be identified by something that the kids chose. And I said that this is how we want to be identified. You would also see the teachers in white coats. So we have a white coat ceremony for our teachers where we honor them with a lab coat and say, welcome to the field. It is a part of celebration. You'll see kids with very clear structures at the table. They'll have a structure around how to question. They'll have a structure around how to give feedback. And you'll see them with a notebook where they're writing through as they go through their math problem and telling the story or asking what might somebody see difficult. You'll also see time. So you'll see a timer, and the timer will be set to 7 minutes. The kids get 4 minutes to work independently, and then they get their 3 minutes for them to work as a group. It's really dynamic. You'll see kids moving as well. You'll see a teacher sitting at a table conferencing with kids. So it is a dynamic model that we have designed around the theory of differentiation. What we found is that everybody keeps telling our teachers, differentiate, differentiate. Kids are not learning. The math scores are horrible. But what we do is we spend time and make it make sense to teachers in a model that they can feel empowered. And so we celebrate math and STEM. That's the
Gotcha.
that to me is the heart of it, and certainly they can contact it and see it on our website. But it is a dynamic model. We're excited about it, and just so you know, this is not just about the data. We have schools where we've doubled the number. I have a school in Brooklyn, Grady High School, and they were at a space where they just said, "We've tried everything, Dr. B. What do we do?" That's when we come in, and so we have moved Grady to a school in good standing. And so you can move your math numbers, but are you willing to let go of that, right? Are you willing to let go of those curriculums, the stop lying ones, and go to a place of a pedagogy with kids that is centered on relationships?
Yeah, we have a question from the Q&A about how do we deter the white savior mentality and lift up the voices of students of color in the work. It looks like it's someone who's going into the classroom soon.
Be yourself as a teacher. Don't go in with those expectations of I'm here to save you, just get rid of it. You know, it's not hard to say, hey, I'm not here to save you. I'm here to work with you and help you become who you want to be. And let's be honest, when kids see that, kids are gonna call it out. My kids, you come in there with that fakeness, they're gonna let you know with the quickness that this ain't how it goes. So the key thing is to build your relationships, be yourself, but just always be cognizant, always hold that mirror up at the end of every day and ask yourself those tough questions. Did I contribute to the negative stereotypes of my kids today? Was my lessons culturally responsive? Did my lesson empower my students to be all they can be? And be honest with yourself. I've had a lot of those tough conversations with myself at the end of school days, but then once you have those conversations, do something about it. Seek out professional development that can build on your lack of skills. Seek out people in your field who are experienced, people who are getting the job done. I think far too often we look at teaching as a vacuum, working by yourself for your kids. Nah, we need to work together, because the same issues that the kids are experiencing in your class, they may be experiencing in another class. And if they're not experiencing in that other class, let's go to that teacher and find out what they're doing different. You have to be open and honest with yourself, and you have to be willing to change to meet the needs of all your students. And some of that change may say, I just taught a lesson my kids were not interested in whatsoever. Do they need this? No, throw it out. Don't come back to it. You know, I've stopped lessons, middle of lessons, middle of class. I've been doing something and I was like, oh, this ain't working today. Let's talk about some current events and maybe related to history until I can come back and plan something a little better. But you have to be honest. You know, your feelings don't matter. It's the feelings of the kids. If the kids feel unwelcome, the kids feel like they aren't learning, then you need to get over yourself and do what it takes for them to want to learn.
I hear a theme of failure as the best teacher in lots and lots of ways, especially for us as the adults. And Catherine, you want to get in on that question?
Yeah, sure. First and foremost, welcome to the wonderful world of education. I am sending you so much love for your first year, whomever submitted that question. But if you need to tell yourself every day in the mirror, I cannot save these kids, you need to do that, because these kids don't need saving in that sense. They need like a push. They need a heavy push, a strong push, a dedicated push, but they don't need saving. And you as one person cannot save them. You can give them the tools to be successful. You can let them fail in a safe environment, but there is no like magic wand, I'm gonna save all these kids. They're resilient. They're good. I promise. They're good. They don't need your saving.
This is dangerous minds.
None of us are Michelle Pfeiffer today.
I saw
Lightning round. Can you all give one tool that you would arm teachers with to engage in this culturally relevant style of teaching, but also around the instructional materials and curriculum? Lightning round, and then I'm going to give you your closing question.
That's a hard one. 1, 2.
No easy questions on this panel.
The reason why I think sometimes we'd like to think if I give you one thing, your whole world will be better, right? So I wish you discomfort. That's what I'm wishing you as a teacher, because the tool that you have is discomfort, and that's why you want to save kids. So I want you to embrace discomfort as a teacher, and I want you to realize that this is hard work. You know, welcome to the field, and we want you to be here with us, and we want to love you, and we want to support you. So my tool for you is, you know, sharpen that saw. Welcome to the field, and I'm giving you discomfort, because discomfort makes us grow. Stop taking away the anxiety. You know, if you read Jim Stigler's work, and he talked about math education, and what he found is that math education in this country was average, and the average was low. And what he kept finding is that math teachers would take away the discomfort of the mathematics. They'll take it away, and we'll end up wanting to tutor a kid rather than teach. So I think for me, if we're looking to really transform STEM, I'm gonna wish you discomfort. Dr. B says, take your discomfort and use it, consume it, accept it, and use it to make yourself grow as an educator. Because look at what beautiful, you know, Rodney is showing. There's places that you can grow in education. Not every career allows that, and not every career has a space for that. And there's a space for us in this world of education, and true diversity. And I know we talk equity, but I'm hoping that we sooner or later get to talk about freedom and the freedom to really educate our children and to make a difference in their lives. And I need discomfort. That's what this season is
Freedom
about.
and liberation. I'm
Yeah.
going to add that too. And Catherine and Rodney?
Yeah, if I could gift you one gift, it would be the book by Bettina Love, We Want to Do More Than Survive. That book changed my life. Someone in one of my classes, my grad school class, handed it to me one day, slid it across the table and said, good luck. And I still have not finished it start to end, but I come back to it. I like tab it. It's marked up like a Bible, but dig into it.
And they have a new online platform as well, Dr. Love does, with abolitionist teaching. So we should get that resource out. Rodney, what's your tool?
My tool is empathy. Empathy with your students. You know, I think a lot of times teachers get empathy and sympathy confused, and that's really a problem. You know, for example, sympathy is when the kid comes in and talks about the rough challenges that they had to get to school, to come to class today, that life is really, you know, traumatic, you know, and it's easy. It's real easy for you to say, oh, I'm sorry. You know, I'm so sorry that you had such a bad experience today, you know, just relax. No. That doesn't help the kid. No, empathy says, look, I'm sorry that you had this experience happen to you today. But the reality is we still have expectations here. But here's the thing, I'm gonna help you get through this. Because as a history teacher, one thing I first say is that, look, here's some other people who've overcome situations similar to yours. Here's a book on here's a book on somebody who's been locked up as a juvenile who is now a world-class author. Here's a book on someone who survived sexual abuse and has now gone on to do great things. That is empathy, understanding that, yes, your students have it rough, but you're gonna give them the tools to overcome anything that they face. And that's what that relationship is about. When you believe, you know, when you believe in your kids and they trust you, you know, and you give them the skills to be example for it. I always talk about our school librarian. This is a middle-class white woman. She's experienced a lot of trauma in her life. And she comes to our students. And she goes to our students and she builds such strong relationships. She'll give them the craziest book. I'm like, I'm not into that book. But the kids are reading like, I get this. I understand this. It's because she empathizes with them. She understands what it's like to come from a drug-addicted home. She understands what it's like to survive on the street. And so if you can build that empathy in everything you do and extend it to every single kid in your classroom, you will be okay. That is the best tool I can give you, is just to build up your empathy.
This is the final question, and we have a little less time than we planned. So whatever you do, be succinct.
Okay.
You know, the history of people of color in the country is an American history, and all students need to learn about it. And I'm particularly interested in this, a funder that supports curriculum development and instructional materials. But I'm wondering if you all can give an example or at least give some advice around what kind of materials, what stories in history that you would like to see lifted up moving forward. So if we do have the formal curriculum, we know a lot of this conversation has been about sort of the informal and the relational aspects and the ability to innovate and be creative. But for the things that, you know, are on the paper or delivered through the Chromebook, what pieces of history do you really look forward to having something that's meaty and useful for those students?
I'll go. For us, because it's mathematics and STEM, we want to debunk the talented 10 model in math. And so for us, if we would like to see an honest curriculum that speaks to Benjamin Banneker, who wrote one of the first protest letters against slavery to Jefferson. And we want that discussion. Notice in your background, you have Washington, D.C. I'm happy you chose that, because we want to have an honest discussion about Benjamin Banneker's contribution to laying out the city of Washington, D.C., because he had a history before he came to this country and was enslaved, right? And so he is from that Dogon people. And so you can have mathematics, and we will not fix mathematics if we cannot show Black children that they are first mathematicians, the Dogon people, the Shango bone, which talks about prime numbers. And so for us, it is about telling the story and being able to show that your history did not start when you, landed in the Americas and were enslaved. And so we want to tell a different story for mathematics and STEM. And as a company, as a business owner, I fight that every single day, like I said, because they'd rather buy, right, from that traditional company because it's easy to put it out there. And so I'm thankful to my principals and to my schools who partner with me because they're trusting us, and they're trusting us to give them something that is far more empowering in mathematics. So for me, it would be Benjamin Banneker and certainly Malcolm X, because most people don't think about Malcolm X in the context of mathematics, but that X stands for something, right? The ex prostitute, the X, and also the why not? Why not claim leadership? Why not move forward? So for us, it is about telling a real story about STEM and the contributions that Black people have made to STEM and to science in this country, which is not told.
I love how you leave nothing off the table. I love that, Dr. B. Go ahead, and Catherine.
For me, as a former history and language arts teacher, it would be multiple perspectives. Like Rodney said, it's a lie. Tell the truth. Put the truth on the table. Let the students determine the truth. Give them all the facts. Give them the white perspective, the Black perspective, the Latinx perspective. You tell me what happened. Don't give them the answer. Keep it very high level.
And Rodney.
Well, with me, I teach history, of course, so I always try to tell the kids stories of people like them, stories of young people who've done courageous things. I think it's funny we talk, the big thing right now is Hamilton, and everyone talks about, how young Hamilton and Lafayette and everybody was in the story. I was like, okay, that's cool, but did you know that Fred Hampton was 17 years old and the chairman of he was field secretary for the NAACP. He was chairman of the Black Panther Party at 21, that he believed in uniting all people. And that's something, as much as we talk about how separate we are as a country, the younger people are a little more united than our generation. And so I always often talk about Fred Hampton in the context of the Rainbow Coalition and how he pulled everyone together. How he often said, you don't fight racism with racism, you fight racism with love. You have to have an international coalition of people for the betterment of the world. And so I want to give them people who are their age, people who grew up in similar circumstances, but who went on to do phenomenal things. But then there's also a lesson that, Fred Hampton often tell my students, look what happened once he began to unite everybody. He was unfortunately assassinated by the government. So what's a bigger threat to this world? Everyone hating and not getting along, or when you come together to unite as one for the betterment of all people? And so it's a lesson to be learned in his life. And it's also someone who looks like them and someone who's elevated their voices and the voices of marginalized people everywhere. And that's what I want them to be. I tell them to be the change that you want to see in your community. So I'm gonna put people in front of them every single day that were the change agents in their community. And if we can do that with every single student, for them to see someone who looks like them, who sounds like them, who goes on to make a big difference in this world, then they can see that anything is possible.
I mean, I don't need any concluding remarks.
Wow.
I will say I've been living for a few years under a commitment to the value of radical love. And I think, you just really eloquently laid that out, the importance of one recognizing the joy and the brilliance inside of us and inside of our students, but really loving each other as human beings who rely on each other and have to get to that place. I want to thank the panelists. Thank you, Dr. B and Catherine and Rodney. This is, as we said at the top, it's the beginning, or it's part of a series of a conversation that Hunt Institute is having about the role that race plays in our education system. I am also on the hook to tell you guys that the next conversation is about building the next generation of diverse teacher leaders. That was clearly present in the conversation that we had today. It will be on August 20th at 2 o'clock, so go ahead and make your calendar invite. And please go visit the Hunt Institute website to register now. Okay, so Do I turn it back over to Senegal to close us out? Maybe.
I think that was a wonderful closeout to a beautiful conversation. I am speechless. That was not the mute on the microphone. Thank you all so much for your wonderful energy, enthusiasm, and love. Thank you for everybody who attended the conversation. Please share it on Facebook. Please share it, send it to your friends, to your family, to your colleagues, to everyone you think would find value in such an amazing discussion on what our values are in the education system and what our values are when we put pedagogy together. So thank you all so much, and that's the conclusion of this webinar.
Oh, the survey. There is a survey, yes? Please
There
take the survey.
Yes, yes. After you close the conversation, you will get a survey link sent to you. So please put the survey in and send us who else you think should be attending these webinar conversations. So we will send that invite to them. So grateful again. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you, Dr. Harding, for your great moderating. Thank you, Ann Catherine. Thank you, Rodney. And thank you, Dr. B, for such a wonderful event. And this is, again,
team. Thank you, Amy. Thank you to the team.
Only the second in a series, so we have more coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.